Alright guys, today is an episode of the best of the rest, covering some of the weekend's Premier League action. So we'll start off with Leicester versus Brighton, 2-2 draw. A very tight game. I think Brighton will feel as though they should have won the game in the end with the amount of chances they had. It was Brighton who took the lead through brilliant goal by Kaoru Mitoma, players who's in brilliant form. And it says a lot that Brighton can afford to let Leandro Trossard go and have just an instant replacement, because I think Mitoma is as good as Trossard, if not potentially better. It looks like a really good bargain signing from a couple of years ago, I think, but he might have had a loan spell. Took his goal brilliantly. One of the goals of the month for 100% sure. And Leicester did quite well to respond, actually. They had Mark Albrighton come on for Dennis Pratt, who went off injured. And the goal, they were knocking on the door for a few minutes. I think Brighton were dealing with an injury loss of their own, having to bring out Adam Lallana off, who seemed to get injured during the goal celebration somehow. Albrighton equalised. It was a bit of a scrappy goal. I think there was 3 attempts before Albrighton managed to slide it under Robert Sanchez and make it 1-1. And then from then on, into the second half, Brighton had a couple of chances which just had to be scored. In fact, they had one right at the start of the game with Van Heck, who was really unlucky. I don't think it was an easy one because it takes a deflection before he actually heads it. But Solly March, oh my God, he's a bit unfortunate with the slip before he hits it. It was a brilliant setup from Kaoru Mitoma once again. But Solly March absolutely skies it, and the form he's in at the moment, you'd expect him to score that opportunity. I also think Brighton were very unlucky not to have a penalty around that time as well, with Danny Welbeck being clipped down by Luke Thomas. I think Luke Thomas might have gotten away with one there. But Leicester actually took the lead again through Harvey Barnes. And from this, I think it was poor defending from Brighton and Van Heck in particular. I think it might have been his Premier League debut this game, or his first Premier League start anyway. Because what you can't do in the Premier League is, when the ball's bouncing in the box, you cannot wait and let it come across your body in a situation like that, because what happens is Barnes nicks it off him and manages to sort of get a good connection on it and just get it into the back of the net. But Van Heck, he lets the ball come across his body, and that's a criminal offence as a defender in the Premier League. So I think it'll be one that he learns from anyway. But the equaliser from Evan Ferguson was an amazing header. He had to get that pinpoint accurate, and he did, just inside the post. And he's in a really good run of form. Evan Ferguson is. I think he scored or assisted in 4 of his last 5 games, which is really good going. Especially when I think he might have been on the bench for a couple of those games as well. But it was an interesting game to watch. I thought there was a couple of standout performers for Leicester. I thought Tielemans in midfield had a good game, Dewsbury Hall as well, and I think Harvey Barnes did really well to, sort of realise that Van Heck, he's new to the Premier League, might make an error, and he pounced on it 100%. Brighton as well. I thought Brighton were the better team in this game. I think if anyone should have won this game, it was probably Brighton. Mitoma was my man of the match in this game. I thought he was superb, but I think there were a few other good performers. I thought Lewis Dunk and Pervis Estupiñán both had really good games as well. Estupiñán put in a brilliant cross for the late equaliser as well. But Leicester, I don't think they'll go down this season. I think they'll have enough to stay up. And Brighton, I can't quite see them making a European spot. I think if I was predicting, I'd probably go with an 8th place finish, because I just don't think they quite have that, maybe not winning mentality right at this point, but they're a very good side. And then on Saturday night, Newcastle were held away from home at Selhurst Park by Crystal Palace in a 0-0 draw. And it just feels as though over the past couple of weeks or so, Newcastle, their attack hasn't quite clicked like it was just before the World Cup break, or in the couple of games after the World Cup break as well. Since the turn of the year, it just feels as though they're a little bit more blunt up front. I think this was a game where the goalkeepers both played really well. In fact, my man of the match I'd give to Vicente Guaita. He's not a goalkeeper I rate really highly. I've seen him make a lot of errors in the past, but in this game he was tested very often and dealt with pretty much everything. So yeah, I think in a game that was sort of lacking quality, I think he probably came the closest to producing something of quality. I thought Nick Pope in the other goal also made a brilliant save to deny Jean-Philippe Mateta towards the end of the game as well. And this was a game where Crystal Palace only really had one opportunity in the first half, and that was Chris Richards heading it over the bar when he really ought to have kept that on target. But Newcastle largely dominated, especially the first hour or so of the game, and could have scored on one or two occasions. I feel as though this game, it was more about the quantity of chances that Newcastle had. They didn't have many chances where you thought, oh my god, he's got to score that. I think maybe the best ones came to Joe Linton and Callum Wilson. I thought the chance that Almiron had, I think a lot of people were being a bit harsh with. I thought, I know Almiron has been on a run this season where he scored some incredible goals, but you can't expect him to do it every time. That wasn't an easy chance at all, I don't think. But yeah, Newcastle, I thought their best players in this game were the defenders, Trippier, Schär and Botman. Trippier, Schär and Byrne I've gone with this game. And I also thought Joe Linton had a good game up front, where he was just constantly causing problems, especially in the first half. Crystal Palace, they just really struggled to get into this game. I think they were a little bit, I don't want to sound too harsh, but they were a little bit playing for the draw. I think if you'd have offered them a draw before the game, that they would have definitely taken that, because that means they've come up against two currently top four teams in the past 4 or 5 days at home, and not lost either, and defended pretty well in both games. So yeah, I think they'd have definitely taken that at the start of the week, because Crystal Palace are a team where, once again this season, even though the football seems to have improved under Patrick Vieira and it might be a bit more enjoyable to watch than it was at times under Roy Hodgson, I still don't think they've actually improved in terms of winning matches, scoring points, as that much since Hodgson left. So that's definitely something Patrick Vieira needs to work on. But they're once again in a position where they're not going to get relegated, but they're not going to get close to fighting for a European spot. So it's just one of their mid-table seasons. Whereas for Newcastle, I think draws, if anything, are the thing that are going to cost them this season. Because from memory, I think Newcastle have only actually lost one game this season, and that was at Anfield in the 98th minute from Fabio Carvalho. So very unlucky there, but they've drawn so many games, it must be close to like double figures the amount of draws they've had this season. And going from a win to a draw is worse than going from a draw to a loss, because you're dropping 2 points as opposed to one. So if anything is going to cost them this season, I think that'll be what it is really. But I can't see Newcastle finishing anywhere lower than 6th this season, and that's if they really have a poor finish to the season. I think a Champions League spot, if they can, get back to getting Callum Wilson, Miguel Almiron and Joe Linton all firing up front again, maybe add Alexander Isak into the mix if it does start to go a bit stale over the next couple of weeks, or stays a bit, stale up front, then I think that they should have no problem getting, or really coming close to a top 4 finish anyway. And then the final game I wanted to cover today was Manchester City beating Wolves 3-0. And obviously, the main talking point is another hat-trick for Erling Haaland, his fourth of the season. The previous ones coming against Nottingham Forest, Crystal Palace, and Man United in the derby. I'm surprised I remembered that, actually. All coming at home, I believe. So yeah, it's impressive achievement, and he did take all his goals well. But I want to talk about the idea that Man City are a better side without Erling Haaland. I think that's been said a lot over the past couple of weeks. And my answer to this, is Man City better without Haaland? My answer would be no. I think that having Erling Haaland in their squad definitely improves Manchester City. You can't argue that. I just think there's going to be certain games where they're better without Haaland. I think it depends on the game. Because, for example, the Manchester derby last week, Man City, I think, would have been better off starting Julian Alvarez in that game, because Haaland just wasn't effective at all. But there are going to be games where Man City might have struggled without Haaland, where if Haaland does play, it's a lot more comfortable for them. I think this is one of them, because in this game, Wolves' midfield isn't a very high-intensity midfield. So what happened with the first goal is Mahrez pulls the full-back in tight, so the whole defence is back inside their own box. But then Kevin De Bruyne makes a really clever run, comes close to Mahrez to offer him an option, and no one tracks De Bruyne down. So this gives De Bruyne the time and space to pick out Haaland in the box. Now, if De Bruyne gets this ball right, and let's face it, if you want one player in the Premier League to pick out a cross to pinpoint accuracy, it is going to be Kevin De Bruyne. And he finds Haaland, and Haaland has got a better chance than anyone of getting on the end of it. That's what Haaland gives you. He gives you the option to do that. So in this game, City have been better off having Haaland in the team. And I thought this game City dominated. Wolves defended reasonably well for 40 minutes. I don't think there was much they could have done about the goal. I think the only thing you can look at is the midfield and say one of them should have been tighter to De Bruyne to, put him off putting the cross in, and not give him the time and space that he did have. So I think you may be looking at Mateus Nunes in that situation, saying he probably should have done a bit more. And I also think City were quite unlucky not to have a penalty just after that as well, when Grealish went down. But I thought one player in particular who stood out for me for Wolves was actually Nathan Collins. Now, I know he was fortunate not to give the penalty away with Grealish, but I thought that there were at least 4 or 5 occasions in that first half where he stopped what could have been very easily a goal. There was times where a through ball was played and he stops it. There was a goal line clearance. There were just numerous moments where he had a big impact on stopping Man City from scoring. But the second half, first 10 minutes, all of Wolves' good defensive work was just completely undone by a bit of a moment of stupidity from Ruben Neves, to be honest, to take down Gundogan like that. Because 1-0, you're still in the game. 2-0 away at the Etihad, when you're a team who struggle for goals anyway, it's not going to happen, really, is it? Let's face it. It was a really silly decision. Erling Haaland, you back him from the penalty spot. You wouldn't want to try and save a penalty from Haaland. I know he's not exactly the most amazing penalty taker of all time. He's a good penalty taker, but just looking at him running up to the ball, that can't be very fun. And a few minutes later, Jose Sarr, don't know what he was doing when giving that ball away to Mahrez. It ended up with an Erling Haaland hat-trick, and from there on, City were just comfortable with their 3-0 win. I think Gundogan should have added a fourth, but it's not the end of the world, is it? But yeah, it was an impressive performance by Manchester City, and in the end, it was comfortable as well. I thought Wolves, Jimenez and Traore, they're just nowhere near the level they were a few seasons ago, like when Wolves did the double over Man City and those two just ran riot. I think Wolves should have started Daniel Podence. He was the only player who, when he came on, looked like making a difference.